What's up everyone, it's Coach Mike here. In today's episode of Decoding Athletic Performance, today I'm going to be talking to you about exercise selection. First off, let's get rid of the blue block of glasses and let's get serious. So, if you are not aware, I posted up this picture. The question I asked in this picture was, one of these positions suck, two of them are good, and one of them is elite and not really utilized or known about. You could argue, and there are people that have, and well, one guy actually, only Luke Osteopath, shout out to Luke, who could argue that you could actually train all four of these positions. The problem that we have when it comes to exercise selection is that it's more than meets the eye. So people always get stuck on what to choose, how to choose it, and why, and they just go with what they see or see others do. The focus of the exercise is not always considered, and we just end up chasing things for the sake of it. So the big key from that picture is that all of these could be correct if you can explain the why. And this is what underpins exercise selection. Let's have a look at what most people know about exercise selection before we go into my detailed stuff. So there is a traditional approach when it comes to what we're picking with our exercises in our training programs. So most commonly the traditional approach starts with stable, simple, slow movements, progressing to unstable, complex, fast movements. They're traditionally done with movement progressions relating to the same movement pattern. So let's take a quick look at what a squat progression example would be. In this example, you will see basic movement progressions from a simple exercise to a more complex exercise. An intensity progression starting at lower loads, slower speeds, moving towards higher speeds and higher loads. There are many ways that we could stop along the charts to get to this, but this is a simple foundational format that you can use to check off, are you getting people to hit markers before they earn the right to do something more complex? We like to term this movement competency. So learning the art of movement with a competency checklist with a tempo and loading parameter that gives us reference to what we're achieving in the previous phases, aligning with that movement. But this is not the only way that we should look at exercise selection. We should not only be looking at how we progress movements based on complexity, load, and speed. We should be looking at the specific adaptation that we're getting from those movements and how it relates to overall athletic performance movement. So that brings me to my new model and my new concept around exercise selection, especially once you start having more competent, higher level athletes or clients that you're training. It's no longer just about the load they're lifting and the movement pattern that you're progressing them with. It's actually to do with where you're taking them and the complexity of the movement that relates back to the transferability to their sport or sporting context with movements. Because at the end of the day, there has to be some form of transferability to what we're giving them. It's not just all about what you can do with the basics, right? We need to start looking deeper. So, 3 key things I'm looking at when it comes to exercise selection before we get into the nitty-gritty of what the one is that I'm going to teach you about today in the second part of this video. But 3 things that I look at when I'm thinking about exercise selection. Number 1 is the physical adaptation or performance outcome of the exercise and how that relates to what I'm programming. So this has got to do with my sets, reps, rest, and choice of an exercise in order to give me carryover to things such as max force, strength, stability, velocity, or hypertrophy. So I'm going to pick an exercise that I think is going to give me the greatest transferability to the adaptation that I want from this training block. And remember, each exercise is different. So when we go to picking our exercises in our order for our programming, for the entire session and the entire week and the entire microcycle and the next block and proceeding, we need to actually understand what the outcome of that exercise is for. Second thing that we're doing a lot here at MFP when it comes to our exercise selection is resilience. Resilience relating to range of motion, the stress that the exercise is putting to the specific tissue that we're looking to strengthen, relating to robustness to help that athlete minimize any potential risks when it comes to getting injured in their sport. So we need to stress the joints, ligaments, tendons, muscles, muscle slings, and movement patterns through resilience style exercises that give us feedback to help us prevent potential injuries with the athletes. And we also need to look at it from how is this position that I'm putting the athlete in stressing them, and where is this happening potentially in their sport that I'm trying to minimize the risk for. There are specific things that we need to look into when it comes to this in terms of how we program for it. And commonly we use sub-maximal strength training parameters, hypertrophy training methods, and a lot of isometric or strength endurance style, where we're stressing the tissue for a prolonged period of time to get it more robust, right? That's typically what we do here when it comes to picking these exercises. The big one here also is increasing specific range of motion. We want to stress the deep positions of stress for the joints, right? There's some really good stuff happening at the moment when it comes to strength through length and how that relates to injury prevention. And if you're not doing it correctly, why you're missing out when it comes to athletes. Now, if you're not an athlete and you just want to get strong at a few key lifts, but you want to look after your joints, it's still very important to put your body through full range of motion training and stress it, specifically utilizing sub-maximal strength endurance, or hypertrophy style training parameters. And the last big factor that we're looking at the moment is to do with movement enhancement. And this is to do with sport-specific training. So the term sport-specific was brutalized and destroyed about 10 years ago, where people were saying you can't train sports-specific in a gym. But what's happened in the last 5 years is now that we're seeing a big change, and where we're doing a lot more speed, agility, explosive movements that correlate to transferring the gym to the sporting field. So with this, the big one here is, what joint manipulations am I putting stress upon the joints that relate to the sport that I'm putting them into, or which movement am I picking that relates to a performance outcome in a sport? And we're starting to see now, not only as strength and conditioning coaches, strength and conditioning coaches, we make you strong, we make you fitter, we're actually helping you move better, enhancing your quality of movements that relate to what you do in a sporting sense. So it's kind of like now you're becoming movement performance specialist as well. So there's a big transfer right now. This is where skill complexity comes into it, and the choice of what we're picking that is slightly outside the scope and box of what's common in the gym. So we can't just look at the basics of, oh, I need to get my back squat to 2 times body weight, or my trap bar deadlift. I need to start looking at stressing the body through movements that relate to the sport and the athlete and what they're doing. It's no longer just applicable to go basic with, I'm just going to focus on this foundational strength stuff. But how does this fit in to my post? Well, let's go down and let's have a look in the gym, and let's talk about what I'm doing with this movement and how I'm manipulating the split squat to strengthen the foot relating to sporting movements.
That shit crack.
All right, so let's take a look at these 4 movements in isolation. Let's start with the bad one first. Now, my man Luke Osteo, I'm back with you again here. He reckons that we should actually be able to train this position where in a split squat, the knee can track in medially. The reason I won't do that in this position is because most non-contact injuries that happen, especially with the knee or even the ankle, happen when we collapse through the midfoot. So we lose our position in the midfoot and the knee immediately drops in, because this puts so much stress on the knee structure. It's not a strong position. This is not a position you want to be in. It's not a position that you want to be loading with heavy weights in a split squat. I need to strengthen where I want to be, because I don't want to teach my body to be in a bad position. So I would never myself program or coach this position. The only way that I would ever want to program where it looks like my knee is pointing in, is more in a bowling squat, where I'm going across the back with my back leg. The difference here is this is actually loading my hip and the outside of my foot. So the outside foot is really important when it comes to a lot of athletic movements, especially cutting. And also the knee is staying out. So even though it looks like it's going across, it's because I've manipulated my hips with the back leg, right? So that's why I wouldn't use that position. I'm yet to see how that's going to benefit me. The other one is a traditional split squat position, where I'm here nice and stable, foot is full contact to the ground, and I'm loading straight up and down. This is very safe, this is very strong, this gets strength in the hips and the quads in a split squat position, boom, relating to single leg strength. The third one is the ATG split squat, which is the deepest range of motion on the front knee, where I'm pushing the knee as far forward over the toe as I can, loading that patella tendon, quad, and even this front ankle, boom, nice and strong. A really good range of motion movement that's really specific to strengthening the knee in correlation with a little bit of foot strength as well. This here is awesome, and you should definitely look into utilizing this position. This can get loaded quite well. We're looking to get towards a loading of full body weight on top of it as sort of a top end goal with that. With the split squat that's stable, we're going well above. We're looking at 150% times body weight in this position with a bar. Both of those can use bars and dumbbells. The variations are endless. The third one though, the least common of the three, is to do with the foot position on the front leg. We can just do a calf raise, but what you would have noticed in my video post is that I'm actually loading the outside edge of the foot with the ankle bone high and to the outside. This now puts the focus of this exercise into that position, right? So it's actually quite a strong position, and it's right under the base of the tripod of the foot, so one aspect of it, which is related to a lot of cutting, footstep, and deceleration, boom, and then also running. When we land, we hit the outside of the edge often and transfer our weight. So why I like this position is because of the transferability, but the foot is the contact with the ground in all athletic sporting movements that we have that aren't water-based. The foot is the key. If the foot leaks, the knee leaks, the hip leaks. So you can have the strongest squat in the world. The problem is most squats a slightly turned out foot, not the same position that we want to have athletic sporting movements from. And it doesn't always correlate to just because you have a strong squat, you have a strong foot and ankle. And if the ankle and foot is weak, boom, it doesn't matter how strong the squat and the hips are, I'm still susceptible to injuries. So I need to find ways to strengthen it that correlates to other movements and put stress through this continuum. Most commonly, we isolate the ankle by doing strengthening with calf raises, bilateral, boom, bent knee calf raises for soleus, single leg, and so forth. Most people aren't loading the foot in this position. The other thing that we see that happens in this position is to do with the back foot. So even though it wasn't the reference of the video, the back foot is internally rotating through the hip, creating a spiral pattern, which correlates to how we finish our back leg position in a lot of movements, especially running as well. And it correlates to then being able to load this position and put that stress down through that spiral pattern, creating this column effect up through the leg, down through the hips, boom, and strengthening that position. How we typically want to strengthen this is more to do with resilience and robustness, time under tension, lower loads, and isometric position holding. It's not something that we need to load up and think, oh, I'm going to do this with a maximal barbell on my back. I'm actually going to keep it more light, keep the tension in this position, and strengthen it either with pulsing type actions, holds, and so forth. So again, the big take home from this is it's not that any one of these things is better than the other. It's to do with what physical adaptation you're looking for and why you're picking what you pick in training. For more, hit me up, reach out. We look forward to doing our next videos and stay tuned for more. Peace out, team.